navigate to the middle of nowhere. I am literally in as close to the middle of nowhere as I could find after driving for an hour and 30 minutes. And check out what I found. Remote controlled model area randomly in the absolute middle of nowhere.
You got a spare goggles?
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay, this is. Oh, I'm not putting anything on this goggles. With my past vertigo, I don't care what one of those.
This thing is so massive, I can't even fit it in one frame. Here's a 5-inch quad so that you can compare it to, but it's huge. It's using 9-inch props, and I'll talk about it in a second, but first I gotta thank a couple people. First and foremost, I drove like an hour and 20 minutes looking for somewhere that I can fly this thing without bothering anybody or causing any trouble or just any issues at all, and I stumbled onto an specifically electric model airplane field in the middle of the Santa Monica Mountains. Just crazy that I literally stumbled across it. And there were some guys here that fly pretty much every morning, some very older guys, and I'll put it at the end, my short discussion with them about what they think about these things. But I thank them so much for graciously allowing me to fly here, because I know model airplane guys are not too thrilled with the things we do, and that's why I couldn't fly at my local airfields, because they're just not thrilled with this sort of stuff. And so I also need to thank Catalyst Machineworks, because the last time I flew something like this on my channel, it didn't go so well. I think if they were aware of that, they probably wouldn't have sent it to me. And so the main difference between that last time and this time is that I didn't build this thing. And if you guys have seen my builds, they're not the cleanest, and I kind of just throw everything together and it works. And I do it in a very specific way, so that I build and design and use things in a very specific way to make it very easy for me to manage, so that I don't have to put a lot of time into it, a lot of effort into it, and it kind of comes out mostly clean and nice. And so that time, what I think happened was, it was a combination of me kind of throwing it together and also not testing it well enough, because I think the flight controller was just overwhelmed by the vibrations. And so fast forward to today, we have flight systems and everything designed specifically for this kind of thing. And this one is using a Radix full-size the full-size Radix board, and the gyro that's on the Radix board, the X-Class guys, some of them at least, have told me tends to work out a little bit better. I am not an expert in this size or this class at all. I'm the farthest thing from an expert in this. I'm going to be doing my best to speak on it, but it's very likely I'm going to say something incorrectly at least, because I don't have a lot of experience in this. I've flown about 5 crafts like this, not including like aerial photography platforms and things that are huge. And yeah, that's pretty much all my experience with things of this size. So take that with a grain of salt as well. But with that being said, I'm going to share to you their concept, their thoughts, their ideas on X-Class. This is from Catalyst Machineworks. So Catalyst Machineworks has been doing this stuff, not just X-Class, everything, for a long time. They were one of the very, very starting people in the industry to start doing any FPV stuff or anything at all. And so when they took a look at X-Class, they had the same thought as I did, which is it's great to have a massive thing flying, but we're flying this huge thing with tiny little rotors at the end of these long arms that are 1 meter wide quad, and it doesn't really make sense because it's just unnecessarily large. So they actually shrunk an X-Class quad down to size, to a reasonable size, so that the props actually fill the space. And so it was a quad, and it didn't really take off because X-Class already had some traction, or just large 800 to 1000 size just already had traction at that point, so it just didn't work out. So then they started moving into the bigger and bigger sizes again. And so this is kind of an alternative build structure for a couple of reasons. So the X-Class quads typically have larger motors, 1 ESC, 4 props, bigger batteries, 12S, bigger everything. And this is closer to a mid-range quad than an X-Class quad. So it's got 2 motors per arm, obviously. They are 2812 motors in 690 kV. And the props that they've put on it are, I think they're APC, or no, they're HQ 9x5x3. Very interesting, and it's a very stiff prop. It's a glass nylon prop. And so they have 2 APD ESCs per arm. So just looking at this segment here, these 2 motors together weigh apparently considerably less than one massive X-Class motor, and they are also cheaper as well, significantly cheaper than one massive X-Class motor as well. So already there, it's much more economical to run something like this. You do have to buy 2 ESCs, which I think he told me that they are comparable in price together to one giant X-Class ESC, and you're running much smaller batteries. You're running 4S 5000 milliamp batteries in series to give you 8S, which is drastically cheaper, and that's something that you kind of need to buy a lot of. So you could easily rack up thousands of dollars in batteries for something this size if you're running 12S, and also charging it is a pain. And so this is just overall much more manageable and maintainable than a full-blown X-Class craft. The frame and structure that they have designed for this is really, I mean, it's as simple as I could imagine it, but it's not the final. This is a prototype frame, and they are using this for marketing and whatnot, and so they sent it to me because I'm pretty sure they've gotten their money's worth out of it, so they're okay with me breaking it, and I did have a couple close calls, but thankfully 2 solid flights and no breaks or no crashes or anything. So let's talk about the actual flight performance of this thing and how it is. So believe it or not, this thing doesn't actually weigh a whole lot. It's about 2.7 to 2.8 kilograms all up weight when it's flying, which for something this size, I think it might be an 800 or somewhere between 800 and 1000. It's not a lot of weight, especially for having 8 motors and all of this stuff on board. It's not really that much weight. The X-Class quads tend to weigh a lot more. So something that they were telling me was that this tends to have a better, on paper, power to weight ratio than an X-Class quad. So it's impressive that it can, they say it can sort of somewhat match the X-Class crafts. Now, again, I don't have a lot of experience in this area, so I can't compare the flight performance of this versus the traditional real X-Class crafts, but just comparing it to like 7-inch quads and 5-inch quads and everything else, I would say the one biggest advantage to X-Class and things of this size is the sheer noise of it. Just the whomp and punch and power and draft and just the grip and pushing through turns. The noise of this thing is not something that you can appreciate by watching a video. When you see it in real life, I mean, these old guys and the young guys, and there was like 10 people here watching at some point, they could not, they were just cheering and like joyous. It really gets the crowd pumping, and that is the #1 advantage of X-Class. Otherwise, I have never flown something of this size that can even begin to match the overall control and handling performance of a smaller 7-inch, 6-inch, 5-inch, 4-inch, pretty much any size quad smaller than it. And that's probably for a number of reasons, and I hope that it somehow can, I mean, when I first saw these things, I thought there was no way this thing could match the speed of a 5-inch. I thought 5-inch was going to be, or around 5-6 inches, going to be the fastest size, and it's going to take such an immense amount of power to match the performance and speed of a 5-inch that we wouldn't see it for a long time. I was proven wrong within like 6 months. Very wrong, not even a little wrong, just like extremely wrong. They were even faster than 5-inch quads. And this is no different. The cruising speed, top speed of this feels faster than any of my acro quads. It may or may not be, but compared to my 5-inch acro quad, my 6S 5-inch acro quad can actually maintain its higher speed longer than the punch on this thing. And that has a lot to do with the battery and the setup of this, which I'll get to in a minute, but discussing more about the flight performance. So I would expect that this may have a similar top speed to an X-Class craft, which is what they tell me it has, but it may not have the same cruising speed. So just like a 4-inch quad versus a 5-inch quad, or a 3-inch quad versus a 5-inch quad, the smaller quads will be able to handle faster, sharper, quicker, and have like little tight turns and change direction easier. And I think that this may be where this thing falls. But again, I am purely extrapolating based on my experience of running everything. I have no clue if that's how it actually is. I'm just guessing here. I'm not an expert at all, not even remotely in this size class. It's awesome, it's freaking amazing to use, but I'm just extrapolating. So first of all, please let me know if my extrapolation and my ideas about it are at least somewhat accurate, because it's just so interesting to me to run this thing of this sort of size. Now, issues that I think that this thing has. I think that it needs more battery. So what I felt was, when I'm pushing it and I'm flying it, it felt sort of like an underpowered micro, just in a much bigger space. It turned a big field into a micro space. And the top end of the throttle, like the top 20%, just felt like it didn't have power. It just felt like it gave up. And I think that's because of the batteries. The batteries, I can get it to give me low voltage warnings very quickly. And the second flight that I made on it, it was on, one of the batteries has a dead cell, so it can't really charge up or charge down. It just stays at 3.8 volts. It doesn't change at all. And so I was able to, essentially from the very get-go, I could punch it and it would give me low voltage warnings. And that would even happen on fresh batteries that are good. So I think that a 5,000 milliamp 4S or 8S battery is not quite enough for this kind of size and all these motors and all the power that this thing requires. I would expect it to need at least 8,000 milliamps just to be able to give you that throttle performance that you might want. That being said, this runs on 8S, and X-Class things usually run on 12S, and I would say that 12S would probably suit this thing better as well, because the voltage sag that you see on 8S, even with a larger capacity battery, will probably be worse. And so if the smaller stuff has taught me anything, it's that you really need the higher voltages when you start pushing the performance limits or carrying a lot more weight. So when we move to 6S on 5-inch quads, really 5S is fine. You really don't need more than 5S on 5-inch quads unless you're hauling around a whole lot of weight. 4S is totally fine too, but what we're battling is the voltage sag. On 6S, there is essentially almost zero voltage sag until the quad just falls out of the sky, and that's really the ideal situation. Your battery lasts perfectly fine until the end, and then it just drops out of the sky. That being said, lower voltage and bigger capacity tends to give you more flight time, so it's a balancing act. And this overall is a great point in like a graph of performance and build and setup and structure to help with future builds and setups and structures, because you can only get this kind of experience by testing it. You can look at numbers, you can look at the math, you can look at all the paperwork, but when you build it and you test it for real, it's different. It's just different. And I'm sure that KababFPV Machineworks has had so much experience doing this, because they actually build these things ready to fly for people that are qualified. And I need to emphasize qualified. And I would say that I am just at the brink of qualified, because I was genuinely afraid of this thing when I took it out of the box, because it's so big and so intimidating. And if you do something wrong, you really could hurt yourself. And the batteries, the way they work and the way they wire up is not straightforward and simple. I mean, it's not complicated, but you have to be aware when you're doing everything. So like they told me, this is not intended for the novice user. This is not intended for somebody that is new. This is intended for somebody that has a good amount of experience building these things and is aware of how to function with them, how to maintain them and everything. And I mean, yeah, I could just keep talking for hours, but I'm just going to leave it at that. You guys can ask everything you like. I hope I can answer the questions. But all in all, I'm really impressed with the way this thing handles itself. It's obviously not as sharp and nimble as a 5-inch or something smaller than it, but it is very, very impressive to fly and run this thing. Absolutely. And the number one benefit, like I said, is the noise. The noise is just unfathomable. It's just so awesome to hear. And yeah, so people are racing these. It would be great to do more with it. Oh, something else I could talk about is that there's a lot of people that are trying to run kind of full-size camera systems or like SLRs on FPV systems like this, and some people have been able to pull it off. It's such a hard challenge that I think it might be easier to work on a camera that's smaller and specifically made for like a smaller quad to get the footage quality that is desired, rather than trying to build a quad with today's tech that we have to carry like an SLR with a giant lens and deal with it so that you don't get jello. You don't have to deal with the motion of the quad, and you can actually use it in post-processing, and you can post-process it and actually use it for real footage. It's just unlimited things that we can talk about and discuss about this thing. But yeah, I hope this was informational, was fun to watch. I'm gonna send this off to Tommy, I think, or I was gonna do this video with Tommy, but he was unavailable. He was out on a job shooting, and so I did it on my own, and I think I might give it to him for him to do a video as well if KababFPV Machineworks would like me to. Thankfully, it has survived my punishment, and yeah, take care. Floss your teeth. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Drone burst, I'll put it that way.
But what do you think about them?
Pardon?
What do you think about things like this?
I'm not a fan of them. In the drones are what's starting the limits with FAA and going to put all the restrictions. And then the drone people, and then on top of it, FedEx and Amazon wants all this extra stuff on. So pretty soon we'll be able to fly crap like that without some goddamn transponder on it. And in this particular field is only one of 2 parks of the whole USA where you're allowed to fly.
I think there's FAA approved parks in there.
No, but there's no other national park where you're allowed to fly except this one and one back east.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
We were grandfathered in, and we're kind of anal about it, because if somebody screws up, we'll lose. Because it is just at the whim of the local superintendent, and since it was grandfathered in, he could shut it down anytime.
Well, could I graciously fly this thing for a couple minutes?
Yeah. All right.
Morning. I'm just going to run a 3-cell this morning.